Yo, what is up, guys? Welcome back to Tag Team, the Pokemon Trading Card Game's premier podcasting trio. My name is Riley Holbert, joined as always by my good friends, Mr. JW Creewall and Mr. Andrew Mahone. JW, I saw you waiting in anticipation for me to say your name first. How's it going?
Well, it's good to be back, first of all.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Yes, I took the last week off to go visit the newborns in the family that all live in the Maryland, Virginia area. So a couple of 1 month old babies.
One of those gotta be right.
In on my wife's side of the family. So we were over there and hanging out with them.
And you got to go experience the Ravens game of a lifetime, baby.
Yeah.
Let's go.
It was, I'm a Lions fan, and I did witness the Ravens beat the Lions. We got tickets. We sat literally the last row of MT&T Stadium, but it was great. That was my first NFL game, and it was a lot of fun. Obviously, the Ravens just absolutely put the beat down on the Lions. But the nice thing about my relationship with sports is that no matter what happens, it really doesn't affect my day. So
No.
it was a great time. You had to think that the Lions were going to put up a little bit more of a fight given their, pretty explosive offense and the
5-1 record.
Yeah. 5-1 record. They had lost one game in overtime. They had 15 straight games with over 20 points. Yeah. Their offense was cooking, and then to only put up 6 points was, you never expect for your team to win on the road, especially against another team with a solid record, such as the Ravens. But to lose in that fashion it wasn't embarrassing because I think all the Ravens fans were actually really mature, really nice. And
really?
Yeah.
It sounds like it did affect your day a little bit. I'm just going to say.
just throwing that out there. Yeah. But it was a great time. So.
I'm glad you had fun.
And we'll see where we end up at the end of the season.
We will.
Because I sensed a little bit of kind of one-upsmanship on your end, where you're like, my team better.
You were picking that up. All right, because I was putting that out there for sure. Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah.
I'll see you in the bowl, buddy.
I'll see you.
Okay. Well, yeah, definitely did affect your day at least a little bit is kind of what I'm picking up as an outsider with no skin in the game.
So today's podcast is going to be about the new cards from Paradox Rift, new decks, new look at the metagame. JW, you're going to Toronto, right, this upcoming weekend, but that is kind of old hat at this point. I mean, yeah, we've seen this format played out. Oh, we just have Mew, VMAX, Win Lil. Okay, sure.
Most European outcome possible, by the way.
True.
We had Lugia, V-Star, Win Sacramento. We had a couple of Lost Box decks win, the other regionals. Sure. It is what it is. Play the deck you like. The format feels pretty, pretty figured out at this point.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and just not to go too far off on any tangent, but yeah, I think we're still thinking about Miraidon. It's going to be me, Jesse, and my brother, William. Still thinking about Miraidon for this tournament. Still think it's a fine play, but like you said, it's just kind of play whatever you feel like. A lot of people have had success with their own pet deck, and so we're kind of taking that mentality again into Toronto. And I mean, honestly, why shouldn't we? Like, Jesse and I have both made day 2 both tournaments that we've been at with Miraidon, and obviously Jesse the back-to-back top 8s. I got top 4 in Peoria, so frankly, there's no reason in my mind that we shouldn't play it. And you look at, how the meta might be shaping up. Like, you got good matchups in Colorless Lugia, which is doing well. Chin Pao, which is doing well. There's a lot of things out there that have me excited to play Miraidon in Toronto.
Yeah, I think you would regret it if you didn't sleeve up Miraidon.
Yeah, and then obviously the comfortability with the deck and being able to navigate it at optimal capacity, I think is pretty important too. So
right.
See how it goes.
So I'm going to LAIC, which is going to be the first major tournament with Paradox Rift legal. We're starting to see Paradox Rift ideas and decks take shape on a worldwide kind of scale right now because the set list just came out. I mean, we just got access to the entire list this past weekend. Today's Wednesday. I mean, we really just got access to that on last Friday. And so now players are kind of taking it all in, and there's a lot to take in, and trying to digest how will this set impact the format ahead. And that's particularly important for me going to LAIC. It's going to be the first major tournament with this set legal that many of us have the opportunity to participate in. So I think that's going to really drive our discussion today. What decks thrive in the Paradox Rift format? What old decks get better? What old decks get worse? And what's our top handful of decks really going to be looking like? How are we predicting things are going to shake out?
Definitely. Yeah, really, and I think there's the starting frame that I want to take a look at is almost centering around, what people are contextualizing around the meta of today, right? So we had 2 regionals in North America that were both won by a Lost Box deck, Lugia winning the third. And there's a lot of hype around the new Jirachi card that prevents the placement of damage counters onto your bench by your opponent's attacks. Obvious intention there is a sort of mana fee for Sableye, if you will. I guess first and foremost, how does this impact the placement of Lost Box in the meta? Is it still a top tier deck? Is it falling off with the reduced effectiveness of Lost Mine? Does Jirachi just not see play at all and it doesn't matter? A Spiritomb-esque outcome? What do you guys think is going to happen in the wake of Jirachi?
Jirachi doesn't seem like it impacts all that much because you think about what decks would want to play Jirachi. If you're playing it in a deck that already has beefy I guess, Pokemon in general, 1 prizers or 2 prizers, then they're not going to get knocked out in 1 Sableye ping. So multiple Sableyes, usually happen so late in the game that, in many cases, it's not particularly impactful, or those decks have strategies around them. But if you're a deck like Charizard that has to evolve, maybe a Baxcalibur or something, if you have Jirachi down, that's generally okay for a Lost Box deck because then they just go Greninja. So it forces you to have both Jirachi and Manaphy, and I think we have all kind of theoried this problem where you just end up running out of bench space because you're trying to protect your evolving basics with your Jirachi, and then you're trying to protect your Jirachi with the Manaphy because Lost Box has a ridiculous amount of tools at their disposal to pick off those basics on the bench. So I don't see Jirachi being something that players will slot in. Maybe in the, certainly not in the evolving decks. I don't see it as something that I would be worried about. Maybe in something like a Miraidon where it's like, okay, you have these beefy basics that come down with enough HP to survive 1 Sableye, and then maybe you're able to, deny the prizes that the Sableye would take by getting a Jirachi down. But I mean, it's the same kind of problem, right? Because you get Jirachi down, and that's another easy target for a Greninja. So I just don't see it having that much of an impact, and I'm really hoping that it does destroy Lost Box, but I don't think that's the card that's going to take it out of the meta for sure.
So I think for me, when it comes to, we call this theory modding, right? So you're not actually playing it, you're theory modding. I mean, and that's the thing is I've been playing a lot of Paradox Rift. I've done testing with Jesse, did some testing today on stream. I mean, I'm getting my games in. It's not available on, the digital client yet, but I've been printing out proxies, running games, and getting some kind of initial feelers for what kind of cards I like and what cards I don't like. But, what strategies will Jirachi actually work well in? So I think, from that perspective, what decks can accommodate Jirachi? And let's actually pinpoint those and say, I think Jirachi will make this deck's Lost Box matchup better, and I think they can actually accommodate the bench space for Jirachi. Are there any of those decks that come to mind for you, Riley?
There's one, and it's a deck that actually I think could afford Jirachi and Manaphy, and I think Charizard could actually do that. In Charizard, if you get two beefy boys up against Lost Box, you're usually chilling, and I think if you're able to slot down, you can like afford to slot down the two, right? Because you only need a couple Charmanders in play, and you're chilling. I think other than that, I don't even know if it's that good in the play you described in Miraidon, JW, right? Because then it's just like you said, it's a Greninja target. You get crammed, and then you Greninja the Jirachi and the Raikou or whatever, and now you're really sad.
Well, the point is that it would have to the way that the deck that I think Jirachi makes the most sense in would be something that has big basics, something that doesn't evolve, right? Because then
like
you're
a Roaring Moon deck.
Mayhaps.
But then I don't know. The thing is, and this is the existential problem for Jirachi, is that Manaphy actually prevents more damage than Jirachi. I mean, for the most, I think so. I feel like,
sure,
sort of
290s. I mean, it's like more efficient
damage
placement, but it does technically prevent more. Yeah.
So then you need like both, right? It really does feel like you need both, or else what's the point, right? So,
but then in the decks that you would want both down, which I think, immediately the evolving deck that comes to mind is, I guess you could say Guardy, but that has a lot of ways kind of around what we're talking, this situation that we're talking about, but is Charizard. But then the problem with Charizard is that if you're devoting spots to those cards, then you're diminishing just your consistency, even by one card. Like, I feel like that deck needs as much optimization as possible. And in the late game, if you're searching out those cards with your ball search cards, like, you're not setting up extra attackers. Like, it just doesn't really make a lot of sense.
I feel like Charizard with a Manaphy and a Jirachi out, whereas on one hand, it's kind of a high maintenance strategy. On the other hand, no, it's not. You just need Rare Candy Charizard, and that thing is not going down anytime soon to a Lost Box deck.
That's what I'm saying.
And you only need two, really. And they're going to go like 3 for 2, probably. Or, if they get out a 2-prizer, then you're knocking that thing out, no problem. I think that Jirachi and Manaphy down against Lost Box in the Charizard deck probably shores that matchup up, like 100%. And I actually could see the same thing happening for Gardevoir. And I think that, if you're playing Gardevoir, just don't put down Radiant Greninja. Just you could afford an extra turn. You could play a little bit slower, which might not even be a thing because there are cards that really assist Stage 2 decks. We've got the Evolution TM now. I mean, Charizard's already playing for Arven. Slide a Pidgeotto.
Charizard feasts, man.
Slide a Pidgeotto in there. Slide maybe one more Charmeleon in there.
Finally, my alt art, my secret rare Pidgeotto is finally going to have
it's so validated. Yes. And then, your boom, Evolution TM. I've got my guys. I think that Evolution TM has the opportunity to really change the way that we look at deck building, especially for these Stage 2 decks. And we've already seen how powerful Arven can be as a card in these Stage 2 decks. And then when you combine that with the theoretical protection from Sableye, you're like, okay, there's some stuff going on here. This is pretty crazy. I think that it could be Stage 2 time to shine.
I'm kind of with you, Andrew. At least in Charizard, I think Guardy is a little more wanting for bench space on average, but I think Charizard is low enough maintenance, especially in the matchups where Jirachi matters, i.e. Lost Box, that it can afford to get it out and probably would shore up the matchup. I think this is perfect opportunity, though, to maybe pivot towards the TMs, which is another key card that really impacts the way that people are thinking about decks in this format. So we have two main, I think, critical players when it comes to TMs, but all of them are kind of interesting. But I think the ones that people are really talking about are the Evolution and Devolution TMs. So one lets you evolve 2 Pokemon on your bench. Another one lets you devolve your opponent's Pokemon. How are we feeling about the landscape of these TMs? And, Andrew, you referenced Arven, certainly a powerful turn 2 or turn 1 going second combo. You get the VIP pass and the TM, turn any Pokemon into any 2 stage 1s. What does that mean?
I think that the Luminion for Arven play is like very real and owns. I did it today.
Nice.
It owns, dude. I did it today in a Gardevoir deck. I just bumped the Ultra Ball count to 4, and I did turn 1 Luminion for Arven, Battle VIP Pass, and Evolution TM, and I had 2 Refinement Curlias turn 1 that then could evolve into Gardevoirs without Rare Candy turn 2. Like,
after using their ability. Yeah.
That's nuts. So you go Refinement, Shining Arcana, here's a Gardevoir. Like, holy moly, dude. Like, we're cooking, dude. I didn't need rare candies or none of that. I mean, like, previously, you had to, like, will I find my rare candy? Here's Mew from Celebrations. Now you're just like, just get these suckers out of here. We're already playing 4 Curlia because the card's broken. That's like, some decks aren't playing that many of the stage 1s. You got Charizard is running 1 Charmeleon.
Yeah, that's actually,
that's
a really, you as you were talking, it brings up a really interesting point, because I think about Guardy and how often you're leaving a Mew in the active to just go to the slaughter, and you're just passing your turn without an attack. Like, it gives you those meaningful attacks in the early game.
Yes.
For a lot of decks, right? Like, that are just, you're sacrificing Cresselia, or you're sacrificing a Manaphy or a Mew, and it just stays up there. And then you could just attach and evolve. But yeah, that seems really strong.
Yeah, you actually made the point, like, right before I was about to make the same one, JW.
Aha.
Of it gives you something to do other than just attach and retreat.
Yeah. Right.
Like, it's a meaningful usage of your turn 1, which I think is really, really powerful, right? Like, Gardevoir's optimal turn 1 is often just passing with a Mew in the active.
I think that Technical Machine Evolution is like one of the strongest cards, certainly one of the strongest tool cards printed in like recent history.
Ever printed.
I mean, it's up there for me. I think that it's such a strong attack that you would play the Pokemon that attack was on. And then the fact
Would you though? No, I disagree with that.
If it was like free, if you could like
get
it
attacked for free, I think
maybe
you would
if
play
it
it.
attacked
so
for free.
if it was like a Basculin that did this, you would play that. Like Dex would play that, right?
I don't know. That's tough to say though, because
But
had
then the
cards
fact
like
that you could
right?
just like you could search it out, it takes no bench space, right? And it just is like it just does it. It's so nuts. Like compare
it
this
does
to
just do it.
you
That's true.
remember Diancie, like in the Gardevoir GX decks?
Yes, I do remember Diancie.
But that was 1, and that was like not bad.
Well, that format was very slow, right? Because we have a card like that right now. It's Indeedee. There's an Indeedee that has that same exact attack, and that's like has never been considered for any.
Well,
deck.
I think attacking for free would be the most apt comparison
Yes,
to the tool card, because
Sure.
you don't have to retreat, right?
Yes.
So like with Indeedee, you have to get it into the active, whereas with this, you just throw an energy onto whatever is active, and that is equivalent to retreating it effectively, right?
and not having to play a trash Pokemon.
I mean,
Like,
I would simply
you know.
play my beach court and then retreat for free.
The
Okay,
crazy
but
thing,
then you're playing a state, so
the crazy thing is that you could just turn any. So what I'm trying to get at is that the TM allows you to turn any Pokemon that you happen to have in the active into like the most broken starter ever, which is nuts.
So,
is
are you
crazy.
thinking that? I mean, because I'm seeing where you're, kind of heading with this, but from a deck building perspective, then how do you shift your entire deck to accommodate for this tool? Because it obviously has diminishing returns outside of that first turn. So if you're not playing a full count of Arven, is it really even worth it to include like multiple copies of this tool?
Luminion, Arven,
Uh-huh.
Evolution TM. That's all you need.
Okay.
And you just give yourself. It's like a 3-card. I think of it like a package.
Yeah.
It's like you play the Arven package. Some decks are gonna play 4 Arven, like Charizard. Not every deck's gonna be like that. In my Guardy deck, I was just running 2 Arven and the 4 Ultra Ball, the Luminion, and the 1 Evolution TM. Granted, I was trying out a different build of Guardy with like the Scream Tail, so that you could actually utilize the Arvin at other points in the game to like go get different stuff.
your-
But you could go get the Forest Sealstone too, which is still like a really broken card. So I mean, it's pretty good. I mean, it does have diminishing turns, but I think that there's an argument for like 2 Arvin, an Evolution TM, and a Forest Sealstone, and then like you're like, cool, all right, my Arvins go and get those broken cards. That's fine.
I do think Arvin has proven itself as incredibly strong in stage 2 decks generically through Charizard, right? I think Gardevoir of all decks is maybe the exception for how stage 2 decks are handled because it has Refinement
Dragon
earlier,
Engine, yeah.
right? So I have to imagine that the Arvin engine is just the way that people are going to play the average stage 2. So Gardevoir notwithstanding, it feels like such a natural inclusion. You know, what is Charizard getting off its first Arvin? Like a Forest Sealstone to get another VIP pass, I guess. Like at that point, you might as well get the Evolution TM and like guarantee turn 2 Charizard basically. And that applies for any, you know, Garchomp or Serena or any stage 2 can benefit from that strategy.
I think we're talking a lot about the Evolution TM, and I do think that it's going to be a very good card for stage 1 decks, stage 2 decks. I mean, being able to instantly evolve Gholdengo, Bibarel, all that stuff. I mean, I think that all rocks. And I think that you could play the Arvin package, Evolution TM package in a lot of any deck that evolves, you know, probably not Baxcalibur. You don't need it. If you're playing Irida, don't worry about that. But like, you know, non-Irida evolving decks, you could think about it. But what about the Devolution TM? Is this card like where does this card fit in, and what is it actually good with, and will it actually see play?
I'm a little less stunned by Devolution. Ironically, it got a lot of hype, and I think the Evolution one is just the better of the two. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't feel like Devolution is. There's not enough spreading really outside of Lost Box, and I think Lost Box could use it as a sort of counterplay to the massive HP counts of some of these stage 2 decks these days. Otherwise, I just don't know if there's enough damage being moved around the board to make that worth your attack for a turn, right? And I think a lot of decks against EXs would rather KO the EX for multiple prizes than use a TM to take one prize. GW, you look pensive. Do you feel differently?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm trying to think about the decks that would utilize it the best or have it, be used against them the best. Like Guardy comes to mind, right? They load up a Gardevoir, put a lot of damage on it, and then you take off the highest stage. But it just seems like in what I've thought about the card, you're either it serves more of a disruption purpose, right? Like, okay, the Devolution is going to be good to remove the highest stage of a Pokemon that your opponent has rare candied into.
Right.
But stage 2 decks are not particularly prevalent enough that inclusion of the De-Evolution TM seems warranted because, you know, then they can always just evolve up naturally. Maybe there's not that good time to use the De-Evolution. Like, it seems more of a disruption card than anything.
And I feel like that angle is naturally diminished in a couple ways. Guardy being the most popular stage 2 deck and wanting to evolve their Kirlias being one of them. And honestly, like if you evolve a rare candied EX on the bench and don't KO that Ralts, they'll just happily evolve that into a Kirlia and evolve one of their different Kirlias. And, you know, it doesn't feel like that really works. And then other decks are going to have the Evolution TM. So what? You waste your turn devolving them and they just evolve again with the TM? That feels silly too. And it's not like you can chain it forever because the TMs discard themselves. So yeah, it feels just like not especially strong to me. Andrew, I'm curious if you feel differently based on having played with some of these cards, if the Devolution TM is really worth an inclusion anywhere.
Yeah, I think it probably seems fine in Lost Box decks, but how are you getting it? Are you really gonna play more than one? You know, and if you're gonna play one, is it just gonna get Pokestopped away? There's a lot to think about. I've been hearing talk about playing Avery in Lost Box decks, which I actually think is pretty nuts. Actually, like that's that's a cool play because you
They
Avery.
keep the Jirachi and Manaphy.
There you go. Like, what are they gonna do, bro? Like, sure, knock yourself out. You want to keep those two? You really want to keep those two? Like that? At what cost, bro?
Yeah.
So, I do think that Avery is like kind of an interesting counterplay for Lost Box decks. I think the Devolution TM pretty much exclusively works in a Lost Box build, and that's going to be the deck that utilizes it. Outside of that, like if you're not a Lost Box head, you can probably just get past that card. Now, we've been doing a lot of talking about Gardevoir, and it is certainly a strong deck. I heard it was the most played deck in Lille, I think, which is...
That's nuts.
That's so crazy.
Yeah, which is like, wow, okay. I guess, Europeans like their Guardy decks. But does Guardy take the biggest hit in the form of Iron Hands EX? Let's talk about the yellow metallic Michelin Man, physique guy in the room. I don't know where I'm going with this. Let's talk about Iron Hands.
I really thought you were going to end that on a banger, and it just kind of...
It just
fizzled, bro. It fizzled, man.
Yeah.
I know. It's a long day, all right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Iron Hands is not particularly strong. I think it's really only like the one deck that immediately comes to mind for Iron Hands is, and it's kind of a concept that we've seen before, recycled in some ways, but is in Baxcalibur. And I think about, when I see Iron Hands and I think about Baxcalibur, I think about Black Kyurem EX in the Blastoise deck from, a decade ago, where you have the one lightning energy or two lightning energy in the deck and maybe a couple energy search. And then you're just basically setting up your stage 2, attacking with the Black Kyurem or the Iron Hands, and then recycling those energy with superior energy retrieval. Like that just seems like a super recycled concept. Now the Kyurem was doing 200 damage and this Iron and not taking any additional prizes, and the Iron Hands is potentially taking these extra prizes. But that's the parallel that I see of Iron Hands not being in its own deck or not being packaged with lightning attackers, but actually with the energy acceleration of Baxcalibur.
I'm with you on that one. But then if you're really honing in on Baxcalibur being the strategy for Iron Hands, Baxcalibur already has a way to take multiple knock prize turns against decks like Gardevoir, and I would argue it's better with the cross switcher canceling Cologne on the Manaphy play and remove 2 Pokemon for the board for 2 prizes.
Bro, I've never seen that play made though.
Did you not watch the Lille
play,
top 8? It happens.
I actually didn't. I didn't.
It does happen.
Man.
I think that's just a better way to take multiple prizes. If you're already pigeonholing yourself in a Baxcalibur of all things, like, might as well amp your consistency by playing only item cards basically and focus stop.
No, I'd rather amp you very much, bro.
It's also a much better attack name. But so what I'm hearing from you, Riley, and I also I think feel the same way, is that Iron Hands is not particularly impactful. We're not even talking about Iron Hands as like its own deck or being in its kind of ecosystem of its electric energy. Like we're not talking, I mean, I don't think it's going to be that good in a Miraidon deck. I don't think it's going to be good paired with Flaffy. Like it's not a deck on its own. I think it's a tech in another deck, and I think that deck just happens to be Baxcalibur. Like I'm pretty cool on the card as a whole. I don't know if that's the same for you.
Yeah, I think
it could be fun in Lost Box though.
I think it's too much energy.
Right? Like,
I think it's too much energy for Lost Box. I'm gonna put that out there. I think 4 is a lot.
4 energy to take 2 prizes. Like I don't know. Is that?
It's a lot.
4
Now,
energy to take 2 prizes?
no, we'll
like
get
in the
to
mirror.
this. We'll get to this, but I think Roaring Moon is like a cool card that Lost Box can play. That you play some Darkness energy.
You're
spicy.
crazy. You're actually crazy. I don't think that makes any sense.
You play Moltres. It doesn't. Why not? You got Mirage Gate. I'm sorry. Does Mirage Gate say what type of energy it has to accelerate? I didn't think so.
We have seen the Moltres Lost Box concept before.
We have, and it's not crazy. You Clara for the Moltres, and there it is. Yeah. So, you could Roaring Moon in Lost Box. You could. Now, there are obviously other ways to play Roaring Moon, but I digress. I think Roaring Moon's better than Iron Hands and Lost Box. But I do think that Baxcalibur, for whatever reason, remains a popular deck. And I know that there's people out there saying that
I think it's good, though.
about Miraidon, and I get it. Like, some people like Miraidon, some people like Baxcalibur.
There are two wolves inside of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are.
It's like the branching path. Like,
Yeah.
Just pick one.
Yeah, you can't like
blue
both,
pill.
bro. But I think that Baxcalibur has proven itself to be a popular deck. I think it does. I disagree with Riley in that I do think that the Iron Hands is a more consistent way to take 2 prizes and speed up the game against single prize decks. More reliable than the 30 item buffet, double cross switcher, double canceling cologne, opening hands that are ugly as sin, just absolute trash. I open a double cross switcher and a canceling cologne in my opening hands, and I have to Beaverell, so I have to just play them to draw, just horrible stuff. Nightmarish hands. The deck smooths out a whole lot if you just cut all that garbage and just go with a couple lightning energy and say, I'm just gonna hands these fellas instead. But
yeah, I guess my counter to that is I just don't know if that actually meaningfully, even if that is true, right? Even if that's true, that it improves the reliability of that play. That play in general is the selling point of Baxcalibur, right? That you can win against those evolving decks by taking crazy knockouts through Manaphy. And so Iron Hands doesn't fundamentally change that, right? Like, you're taking those multi-prize knockouts by blasting through a single prizer. And Baxcalibur still isn't that good. So does Iron Hands actually make it better, even if because it is beating those decks, right? Statistically at least, or at least in theory, it's beating those decks. If it beats those decks a little harder, does it make a difference for Baxcalibur's meta placement?
That's a fair point. Yeah.
I
Does
think the answer is
Baxcalibur
no.
already have a good Lost Box matchup? Does it already have a good Gardevoir matchup?
Yeah, and if you look at Play Limitless, it actually doesn't have any good matchups. So maybe it does make a difference.
Trying to say.
But
So I've been trying to say this, and nobody listens.
it's actually crazy that I just opened this and this is what I'm greeted with. But it's taking 46% across the board.
That's what I'm saying. You're out of your gourd to play that deck.
Absolutely out of your gourd type of deck for sure. So yeah, I don't know if I'm not feeding to play Baxcalibur now, I don't know if I'm feeding to play it with different energy now in the deck. know?
I've heard people. All right, so then obviously there's the Baxcalibur Iron Hands, but Iron Hands has been quite a topic of discussion. So there are other ways you can play it. You could play it in Lost Box. You could play it in Miraidon with some extra flaffy, power. I don't think that that's very good. Some people, or it's mostly one guy. All right, some people in my Twitch chat have been it's mostly one guy, have been talking about playing it in Lugia. Is that too far? I mean, and we're talking basic lightning energy and the
Well, that gets back to the point.
The
That
vessels.
gets back to the point that Riley's talking about, right? It's how much does that improve the matchup, right? I think about Iron Hands okay, that's going to be for Lost Box. Lugia already has a good Lost Box matchup. What are you doing?
It's
Mucking
already
up the
got a
deck with
good
Iron
Guardy
Hands?
matchup, right? Fine Guardy matchup.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just feels like the decks that accommodate Iron Hands aren't the ones that'll even benefit from it that much. Miraidon honestly would be the deck that would want Iron Hands the most, and it can't
Right.
power it up quickly enough.
Yeah. I mean, it might Iron Hands is kind of the card where it's yes, there are decks that would want it, but in a deck like Miraidon, for instance, you're talking about, we can't power it up that quickly. It's absolutely the deck that would benefit the most from it because it probably is amongst these decks that we're talking about has the worst Lost Box matchup.
And Guardy.
Yeah, right. So then you're
and Charizard.
Yeah, right.
Right.
True. Yeah, okay.
Right.
Facts.
Yeah,
Nothing really good about Miraidon either. But then, maybe there's a way to refactor the deck. You have Raihans or something. You have double turbo energy. You have additional Flaffies. Like, I mean, maybe there's something that we're not considering there in terms of the actual builds changing to accommodate this card.
I legitimately think like the highest impact Iron Hands at tournament play will be it gets thrown into a Miraidon deck and they power it up like turn 2 going first,
Well, or it's the kind of thing where they in LAIC they put it into like just a normal Miraidon deck, and the Miraidon deck just does fine, and Miraidon or in the Iron Hands just never really does anything, but it's in the deck, so everyone's like, oh, this card has to be really good.
It's happening, like the Iron Hands Apocalypse. Yeah, that's
yeah.
I think that's like where Iron Hands sits the most pretty, and I think anything else it's like mid.
So then understand the implications of what we have just deduced, because I think I agree with you guys. You're pointing out that the decks that can accommodate Iron Hands already beat the decks that apparently Iron Hands helps you to beat more. So what the heck is the point, right? And frankly, from my own testing so far, Iron Hands has not been a showstopper. It's been clunky and awkward to power up. You can play it in Baxcalibur. That's probably the smoothest way to play the card. But my goodness,
horrific starter too.
Then you're playing Baxcalibur. So like, there's a whole bunch of a bunch of issues there. So then, does Iron Hands not actually change it? So then, what from Paradox Rift changes something? If it's not Iron Hands, what changes?
Well, we've talked a lot about the benefit of the TMs and that making evolution decks good or better at least, and I think that's a huge part of it. I don't know if there's any like showstopper type cards honestly introduced by Paradox Rift, but there's a lot of good cards, and I think that is an important framing when thinking about the set and how it impacts the game. People talk about how good this set is. And honestly, I think that's a healthy impact for a set to have. I don't really like it personally when a set has basically like a build and battle kit built into it, basically, of like, here's the deck that you're supposed to play. I like it more when they just have a healthy, positive impact on the game. And I think Paradox
Rift,
just
kind of enhancing other decks.
Totally. Yeah. I think Paradox Rift ekes more in that direction than the Fusion Strike direction, where you just take the Mew out of the
gosh,
packs.
you're so right. Or the Rapid Strike, Single Strike direction, where it's like, okay, pick your guy.
Yeah, literally the whole point of the set.
And look how different it is, because we've got this like a very comparable gimmick in the future in the ancient Pokemon, but you're looking at them and you're like, these don't like fit into necessarily neat little packages like the Single Strike and the Rapid Strike guys did. They fit into very neat little packages. This is exactly how Creatures wants you to play them, and if you don't play them like this, you are a buffoon.
Definitely. So, and to be clear, I prefer that direction when new sets come out. I prefer when there's not as clear cut of a path forward through the set. So I think this is good, and I think this is a good like card design, a good impact on the game. But I think it is a less like show-stoppingly obvious that Mew VMAX is going to be the best deck.
I think. All right, so then let me ask this: who's the best attacker from Paradox Rift?
I mean,
the most impactful attacker.
I think that. I mean, well, that's different, right? Most impactful versus best.
The best. Well, what attacker is going to have the biggest impact at LAIC? There we go.
I think Roaring Moon. Yeah. I mean, you bring it up. Like, I mean, I think the deck that I've seen from your streams looks very interesting. Certainly not optimized, but certainly not optimized by any means.
It's my first draft, bro. It's my first draft, and
by any stretch of the imagination.
It is flames. It is flames. That deck is. Natalie said that after fishbowling hands with my Roaring Moon deck, she could actually consider coming back to Pokemon because it's that gas.
She loves the gas dark deck.
Yeah, it's not. And after, you should have seen David Cook's reaction to playing the Roaring Moon deck on stream today. It was like a kid in a candy shop. It was like just unfettered joy. It was just he he was just cooking, bro. He's like, all right, turn one. I could do whatever I
Pokestop.
want. I've got all my guys.
Yeah.
Pokestop. Oh
Dark
my
patch.
God. And it's certainly a rush. It's very fun.
Uh-huh.
And no,
it's the dopamine.
But the deck
hit.
needs to exist. The deck needs to exist in a space, and that's the thing. Is I think the concept is there. I mean, you've got this huge hulking guy who can one-hit KO anything and attack very fast. But how do you have to build the deck to respond to the actual threats in the format, right? And how do you utilize this beast to like actually deal with relevant threats in the metagame, right? Because if it was just a contest to see who could do infinite damage on turn one, Roaring Moon wins. But like, what?
Yeah, but geez, man, you didn't ask me that question. You just asked me what was the most impactful.
So who is
you
the
didn't
most
ask me to
impactful?
actually like contextualize my answer.
All right, so it's Roaring Moon. So how so?
Well, but I mean, I think you look at the rest of the cards. Like you have Garchomp does it's at stage 2, 320 health, and it has a first attack that does 160 damage for 1 fighting energy and accelerates 3 fighting energy. Like, okay, that's a thing. You have like Gholdengo is a card that's kind of Baxcalibur light.
I think it's Baxcalibur plus.
Okay.
Gholdengo's sick, man.
I think Gholdengo and Roaring Moon.
Let me continue. Hold on. Let me
Gholdengo.
continue. You have maybe Iron Valiant. You have maybe Cloth, the Cloth deck. Like you're not looking at a lot of.
I'm gonna give you a
new
demotion for
archetypes.
mentioning Cloth.
190 for 1. I guess 170 for 1.
For
on a
2.
basic. One double turbo energy.
Of which you can play 4, and you're not one-hit KOing anything.
Or you could also play. Yeah, you're right.
That's not true.
I'm demoting you for mentioning Cloth, bro. But carry on.
So my point being, and actually this actually helps my point. Those are kind of the new decks that I think of, after looking at the set. And I don't think Gholdengo is particularly strong. And so you ask, what is the most impactful attacker? And I'm going through all of the new archetypes that I could see from Paradox Rift that have any viability, and it's just a very short list.
Yeah. I think my 1 and 2 would be Gholdengo and Roaring Moon.
Yes.
I think Gholdengo's got a lot of
100%.
potential.
Well, I think Gholdengo's
Gholdengo's
number 2 for me, right? Like Roaring Moon is like number 1 just because it's a 1-hit KO attack for like 3 energy. That seems pretty reasonable. And then you have Gholdengo because there's literally nothing else. So yeah, I guess we're all on agreement.
Gholdengo's sick, man.
But...
Gholdengo's so sick.
Yeah, I think Gholdengo kind of owns.
You're gonna feel like a baller when you roll up with the art rare Gimme Ghoul and Gholdengo. And
no,
make it rain.
the Gimme Ghoul is not the best one.
It's not. I know it's a suboptimal one.
Yeah, they
Call
That's
for fame,
fine, man.
error.
Call has 50 hit points and doesn't have the art rare.
You're playing
Alright.
a 50 HP.
I'm gonna
No way.
I'm gonna make a
In
statement.
this economy?
I'm gonna make a statement, and this is gonna age really well.
Yes.
Gholdengo will top 8 LAIC.
That is so bold, and I love that. Yes.
I'm putting that out there.
Okay.
100%.
What are I want to see the
broken.
Vegas odds on that one. Where's the line at? I could see it. Like my brain is big enough that I could see Gholdengo top 8ing.
My mind is open enough.
Yes, my mind is open enough, but it just can't. It can't be that good, right?
It's sick, though.
I mean, it would be really cool. Like, imagine the Brony that shows up with the max rarity Gholdengo deck
Yes.
and just
And gold energies
destroy-
and making it rain.
Yup, that would be cool. I would really enjoy that.
Literally making it rain.
Could be the most aesthetically pleasing deck.
What's the worst part about playing Baxcalibur?
Baxcalibur.
You don't draw cards. You don't draw enough cards. Andrew.
Baxcalibur, and you don't, and Chen Pao doesn't draw cards. And Chen Pao only has 220 HP.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let me introduce you to my friend Gholdengo.
So my issue with Gholdengo, right, is that is that prizing is probably the biggest issue with that, right? With Chen Pao, you have a few different attackers. You can go Greninja, you can go Chen Pao, technically you can go Excalibur, but you're abstracting away your attacker from your support. Whereas with Gholdengo, they're a combination. So
I don't know if I
more
agree with that
cards you
concept at all.
prize, the more the pieces that you prize of Gholdengo, the harder it is going to be to execute your strategy.
Man, I want you to think back a couple years, 2017, 2018. What was the best, most dominant archetype for those years?
Ooh, Zoroark GX.
That was Zoroark. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but you played it with other things. That's what I'm saying. Like, what?
Not always,
secondary...
even.
Scizor.
Okay. Well, what?
People are playing it with Scizor. They are.
Okay.
They are.
Okay. Now that I can get behind. If it's a pure Gholdengo deck, that I cannot get behind.
Well, sure. Okay. I think it probably
Zoroark and Expanded didn't have alternate attackers.
Well, Zoroark and Expanded, yeah, but that's because it was so. That's like not a fair comparison.
Gholdengo equally is broken easily.
Cards.
Equally is broken, bro. It's so broken.
Easily, maybe even more so.
Potentially more broken.
You don't even have to discard a card to draw a card.
That's so much yeah, and you still get the 2.
You just keep all your resources.
He's tasting, bro. He's tasting. I showed it to Natalie, and she's like, "Oh my god, he's tasting."
He is.
Remember,
tasting. I did.
Remember, perhaps
Slurpuff.
the strongest deck of all time.
I did. I definitely played that deck.
Toadpuff.
Seismitoad Slurpuff. Yes,
Yeah.
I was that guy. I was like the one person that was degenerate enough to play it in my area, and it was great.
And Gholdengo's like 3 times as good as that. So
It can actually
Easy.
attack. That's true.
And 260 on the HP is odd for some decks to hit. I mean, it's weird. You're getting in there like, Lugia's not knocking you out in one hit. Dragonite's not knocking you out in one hit. You're just Miraidon actually hates looking at you, just period. Like, if Miraidon's got no good answers for what you're doing over there, that's for dang sure. So you need I think my issue with Gholdengo is just like, all right, the Guardy Lost Box area, if you could kind of polish that up, then the Gholdengo thing seems broken.
How are you polishing it?
Well, I don't know. I've got to play.
Yeah,
I can't think myself out.
Jirachi.
Yeah, I can't think my way out of that one. I mean, you guys share. You could play Cheryl. You could do Manaphy Jirachi. You could, against Lost Box, you could go Cheryl and then just attach the energy and then just slam it.
It is a good deck for a card like Cheryl. It is.
Yeah, I mean, so like you can heal off damage like that. But against Guardy, it's a little bit weirder because they can just knock you guys out.
Guardy's
single
probably
prize.
real. Yeah.
But that's fine. But I heard Azul talking on his stream today, and I think that this is very true. Is that just because your deck takes a bad matchup in this format does not mean that you just write that deck off. Like if your deck is like, you can't beat that deck. Like who cares? Everybody's playing a deck that can't beat that deck. Like some deck, everybody's playing one of those, right? So
I'm with you. Yeah, I was about to say the same thing, that like you could take an L to Guard, and honestly, of some of the top decks, I would take an El Guardi over other, like,
in America,
at least in the States. Oh yeah, I'll take an El Guardi any day. In the States, you just don't want to take an L to Lugia mostly. That's
true. That's true.
That's the one you don't want an L to. In EU, maybe feel a little differently.
So I think for me and Riley, and it sounds like almost for all of us, are we at like kind of a consensus that we think Roaring Moon and Gholdengo are like the best attackers out of this set? Maybe not.
Roaring Moon and Gholdengo are the best attackers. I just don't see Gholdengo being particularly good. I don't see it being.
But I think me and Riley think that means more than maybe JW does, as JW is seeing the set as more of like a kind of an impactful set on already established decks. Do you think that? All right, so then do you think that Roaring Moon could top 8 LASE? JW?
Yeah, totally. I mean, you bring up the interesting idea of it in Lost Box, and I think that Roaring Moon covers some of the weaknesses Lost Box has initially, right? So you're looking at Charizard is just a pain and an issue for the deck, and that's just an easy answer. You can play it with a secondary attacker of Moltres that, Riley brought up has already been done before. So it's not like you're trying to recreate, or you're not trying to create something completely fresh. There's already kind of a baseline that we know has worked. Things like, I don't know, Urshifu is annoying, right, for a Lost Box deck. And now maybe, I'm not saying it's a particularly good answer, but maybe there's an option now that you can just come out of nowhere and one-shot your opponent's V-Star or V-Max where you otherwise couldn't. I think that's like really
does get yoga looped instantly pretty much, but
yes, sure. And right. So like there's obviously like, issues with that, but taking the last 3 prizes, who cares? Right. So that's where I think Roaring Moon is one of the more intriguing cards of the set, because yes, the drawback is significant, but if it comes at the right point in the game, it doesn't mean anything. Right. If you're using it for your last prizes, then who cares? Right.
I would make the same argument, especially in like a Lost Box deck. It's not like you're just sacking those 2 prizes for free. You're choosing when you use that attack and when you give up those prizes. In a more Roaring Moon focused deck, obviously it's not quite the same, but in a Lost Box deck, you get to make that decision for when you choose to make that trade. And you could make that trade just to win the game. And then it doesn't matter that Roaring Moon has just a couple HP left because you win. Which is pretty cool.
So do we think that, what about this quad Roaring Moon, Professor Seta's? Obviously, we did get a little bit of a package, right? We've got the Professor Seta's Vitality. This is a new supporter card. Obviously, the more ancient Pokemon they release, the better this supporter gets. But as it is right now, we get Professor Seta, Sada, Tomato. I don't know. Is it Seta or is it Sada?
I don't know.
Is it tomato or tomato?
Professor Seta, I'm saying Seta. All right, Professor Seta's Vitality. It kind of comes with Roaring Moon EX in the same capacity that Welder came with Reshiram and Charizard. It's like, you're going to play these guys
obvious
together.
Pairing. Right.
Yeah, this is the obvious pairing. And it's a pretty gnarly deck. You can realistically, it is possible. All the pieces are there with the Earthen Vessel, with cards like Pokestop, Luminion, Mew EX, Squawkabilly, Radiant Greninja. All the pieces are there. You can create a turbo Roaring Moon deck that is consistent and smacks early, for insane amounts of damage. Not unlike Welder, Reshiram, Charizard. It's a very similar comparison in the ways that the decks function. But is that strategy valid in this metagame that it's entering?
Valid, sure. You could bring it to a tournament. I don't know if it's a tournament winning strategy. The frenzied gouging is obviously nuts. It's one of the craziest attacks I've ever seen put to paper. But you have to be trading evenly for that to work. And there's just a lot of 1-prizers floating around. Calamity Storm, conversely, does trade pretty well into 1-prizers, but you are reliant on a stadium constantly being in play to actually KO pretty much any relevant 1-prizer. Cramorant, you can't even KO without a stadium in play. Certainly not Snorlax or anything like that. And I think there will be points in games where Roaring Moon cannot Calamity Storm for knockout on a Snorlax in the Lugia matchup and just loses as a result of that. So again, could you build a deck like that?
Attack. Did 220. Pop it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You can't do that in times though, because you won't have a stadium, right? Like there just won't be a stadium in play, and you can't Calamity Storm for knockout, and you just lose. And I think that'll happen with Roaring Moon. So I think it won't trade very well, and I think 1-prizes are everywhere right now. And so I think having a Roaring Moon focused deck, it needs a more 2-prizer centric metagame.
Well, that's the thing too about Roaring Moon, right? It's like, and this is thinking very far in the future, but its prime opportunity to do well is now, where you think about the
V-stars,
multi-prizers, the V-stars, the V-maxes, right? These huge dudes that.
Well, I think Roaring Moon actually does better against stage 2 EXs, to be honest, because I think it's one of the only basics that really eliminates them effectively. and its second attack actually is sufficient for like picking off the little guys, so you can Calamity Storm away like Charmanders and Raltses, and then you can gouging the Charizards. I think that's where Roaring Moon's niche is most effective. And I think I think it'll improve actually as there are more stage 2s that evolve and the format continues to slow down as we lose the big like V stars and things like that. I think Roaring Moon will be better when we shift to more evolution in the format.
Interesting.
It weirdly feels like, I guess, weirdly feels like it needs some single prize angle. And I'm not sure that the Galarian Moltres from Evolving Skies is really like enough. That's like one attacker you can sink some energy into and just play to try and offset your opponent's 2-4-6 prize race. But my argument against the Galarian Moltres was that it's doing like 200 damage because your opponent is not going to go to odd prizes against your Roaring Moon deck. That means that they had to knock out your Radiant Greninja. Like, it's probably not happening, right? If you're playing the Turbo Roaring Moon deck. So then they're going 2-4, and then you're jamming Moltres to do 200 damage, which is like, 220 damage, which is diddly squat at the end of the game, because what the heck, your Roaring Moons have been one hit KO and things like, what's 220 really doing? So probably not enough. And then your opponent goes boss for game. So it's like, I don't know that there's really a single prize angle that really helps the deck. And that's my biggest concern with the Roaring Moon stuff. It is fast. It's aggressive. It kind of feels like, frankly, Miraidon in a way. And maybe it just kind of occupies that space. Maybe Roaring Moon is just better Miraidon.
Oh.
It is very effective at dealing with the massive Pokemon in a way that Miraidon kind of struggles to do as the game goes on. Miraidon, I think, is more effective at dealing with the low to the ground Pokemon, though. Like, I think Miraidon will trade more efficiently into things like Arceus or, early game basic evolving Pokemon. I don't know. I think Roaring Moon would also really benefit from a more colorless attacking ancient Pokemon that it could accelerate to with Setas. Like maybe something where you could tech like one alternative type of basic energy, right? Or like one or two copies of a different basic energy and a more low to the ground ancient attacker. But I don't think any of the other ancients are a really good candidate for that. They're all like really heavy investment in their color.
Are there any other cards that we want to talk about? I do think that... Yeah, go ahead, JW. What you got?
I think that there's some stall cards that are quite strong. We obviously have the return of Counter Catcher, which is an item that you can play if you're behind on prizes and is an auto gusting effect. So was, in the past, like sparsely played, but had its niche use. And I think that's a really strong card. I think auto gust on an item is great. And, I think Pokemon is handling these types of effects very well, where things like reversal energy, things like counter catcher can only be used when you're behind. And so, that's certainly a tool that is added to the format for a stall type deck. Another card that we should talk about for stall is the Snorlax Doll. Snorlax Doll, if this card is in your hand when you're setting up to play, put it down as if it were a basic Pokemon. It has 120 HP. Kind of a fun card as well.
I don't know how good the Snorlax is in stall though, because you like have to.
I know you do have to start it. Yeah, but kind of fun. Another tool to use.
It is a tool, and I was really excited about the card when I didn't realize that you have to start it for obvious reasons.
Right, for sure.
So. I am very underwhelmed by Iron Valiant right now. I think that the future stuff has the potential to be cool. I was messing around with an Iron Valiant Xatu deck, and then even had one Iron Jugulis in there. and the idea of spreading damage.
Is that how you pronounce it?
Iron what?
Jugulis?
I thought it was like jugulus, like a
Juggle
jugular.
this.
Juggle these, Riley. But
what did I do?
Literally just stole my joke.
yeah, I did. It just made it slightly better.
Oh my god! How did I end up catching that?
I don't know, but I don't think that I think the future cards are not unlike the Rapid Strike and the Single Strike stuff, where it's like Rapid Strike was really good, and then Single Strike kind of had its day in the sun, right? Yeah, and I think a similar thing will probably happen with the future and the ancient guys. I wouldn't write any of those off right now. I think they definitely have the potential to be good.
I really want the future Pokemon to be good because I think the style is better.
Like more interesting.
Really?
Yeah, I think the style is better on the future Pokemon.
It's funny because we actually are seeing. They feel like a reinvigoration of the rapid and single strike. It feels like the future is more about spreading damage, like very thoughtful placement of your counters, and ancient Pokemon are like, I'm gonna do a lot of damage to the active Pokemon. That's sick.
Right.
Very rapid and single strike in nature, which I didn't really think about until you made that comment.
It's true. It's true. I don't know. There's Scream Tail. Scream Tail's ancient, and it spreads damage. Checkmate.
But it's a big chunk on one Pokemon.
Mm-hmm. It is.
That's true.
So kind of the same vibe, Which I mean, I don't hate it when they have like those competing archetypes that, differentiate themselves in that way. I just think the big damage is just funny in comparison to, the big brain like math memes to. Caveman with stick, which honestly it fits with the thematic undertones of ancient versus future.
It does. I'm not sold on Iron Valiance and Zatu being, standard compatible right out the gates. I think as far as the spread deck goes, like Lost Box is going to be that spread deck until it rotates. And I don't know that you're going to be able to convince me otherwise. It's just too dang good. And the fact that you can play as a single prize deck and really limit your opponent's pace through the game is a major selling point for me. So I am definitely more dialed into the ancient Pokemon, Roaring Moon, and yeah. Okay, so then what about your favorite deck, JW? Miraidon. Before we go, how does Miraidon fare? Next
probably not well. I mean, it's already not faring particularly well in this format, and then we've kind of just got done discussing how poor, how poor the counters are to Lost Box, which again I predict is going to be just as prevalent in the future metagame as it was here. So, yeah, I think it's probably in a worse spot than it currently is, which is not in a great spot as it stands.
Well, let's end on this. All right, whose stocks are up and whose stocks are down? What do you think, Riley? If you had to, whose stocks are up and whose stocks are down?
I think Gardevoir and Charizard stocks are up almost certainly, and I mean, Rhydon stocks are down for sure, but they've been plummeting for a while, and that's fine. We're just holding on for the spike that's coming. I think outside of that, I think a lot of the decks that are good right now, they don't like plummet. Maybe Chen Pao stocks are down because people just continue to waste time and money on it. But it's like the same situation, really,
Are Lost Box stocks down? I think that's like a major question. People want to know, like, is Lost Box like fighting for its life out here, or is it going to just persevere and do just fine?
No, I mean, think about the strength of Mirage Gate. Like, you can, it might adapt, right? It might. We've talked about maybe a dark package and the cool new attackers, or even the old attackers that you could play. I think it'll just adapt and change, and it's just a good core that you can play a lot of different things with. So even if it doesn't stay in its current iteration, in its current form, I think Lost Box is still.
I'm with you, man. I think at absolute worst, it changes the way that it's built and played but I think the fundamentals of that deck are just so good that, Jirachi isn't going to be what takes Lost Box out of the meta. Lost Box will find ways to deal with those sorts of cards. Rotation is Lost Box's worst enemy, I think.
Yeah, sure.
I think I agree with
and
that.
It's got
All
some
right.
time left before that. So.
And one final question. Mew VMAX. It just won Lil.
Yeah.
Does it change? Does it get better? Does it get worse?
There's no hard counters printed this set, so that's good.
Do people just stop thinking about it and then it wins LAIC?
Legit possibility, honestly. I think Roaring Mood, I guess, isn't great for Mew, but honestly it impacts Mew like the same way it impacts any other deck. Gholdengo honestly seems like it would have a decent time against Mew because they're really tough to KO for Mew multiple times. So that's kind of sick. But I think otherwise Mew is like kind of the same as always, and it's just a good deck. It just is. I think the one thing that maybe impacts Mew is tangentially if Charizard stocks go up from Evolution TM, then Mew continues to just hate Charizard, and honestly some of the tools that had to deal with Charizard are diminished if you're evolving from the deck. So
I'm personally sick and tired of losing to Mew, man. I don't want to go into this LAIC and being like, all right, it's for real, man. Mew's really not going to hurt me, man. And then it's like too.
I think one thing that we started to see in Lil, and you saw the second place deck play, the Lost Box deck play, was a Spiritomb, and I think that should have been something that was happening where these Lost Box decks.
Second place Lost Box deck plays Spiritomb,
and it lost, man.
Yeah, well, it doesn't happen all the time, but I'm just saying, like, if that first place Mew, if the first place Mew player hit, all the Lost Box decks that played Spiritomb, then they probably wouldn't have been.
It would have been a little more convincing if it was the first place Lost Box deck that played the Spiritomb.
But the second place Lost Box deck to the Mew deck.
It's just one. It's just one. It's just one round, one match.
It's just so. I feel like Lost Box already should be like okay versus Mew, like by the numbers, and then it just loses with Spiritomb. That's got to feel horrible.
Heck yeah, brother. Yeah,
Tomb is fake. Tomb is fake. Who knew?
Yep. But yeah, Mew is never dead. Best investment you could have ever made is to buy 2 battle decks and just rock.
Play
Mew
that only. Yeah, I know. I should have never stopped. The Mew year should have never ended.
The Mew year should have
It's still the Mew. It should still.
Should have never ended, bro. I know it's still 2023. It should have never ended. I know.
Well, there you have it, folks. Mew VMAX is the deck to play, clearly.
Gosh,
for
I can't
LAIC.
believe we ended another episode like that. Yeah, this is so cringe. Anyway, you can find us over on social media on the application formerly known as Twitter, now called X, at Smiles the Riles for Riley, at Real John Walter for myself, and at Enjoy Friend for Andrew. You can also find the podcast at Tag Team Pokemon. You can go follow that. I think we're posting stuff mostly about the episodes when they go live. So if you're into that kind of thing, if you need like a reminder about when an episode goes live and you're already on X, go follow us and you'll get that right to your feed. So that's a great way to stay connected with the podcast.
Thank you all so much, as always, for listening. We can't wait to fill your ears with our beautiful voices next time. Peace.
See ya.